The South China Sea is a vital artery for global trade, with trillions in goods passing through each year. Beneath its surface lie coveted reserves of oil and natural gas, making it a prize for surrounding nations. Once a source of sustenance for generations of fishermen, these waters are now a flashpoint for conflict. China and the Philippines are locked in a bitter dispute over sovereignty, with China's sweeping nine-line overlapping the maritime entitlements of its neighbors. The U.S. has entered the fray, strengthening its alliance with the Philippines and conducting joint patrols, which Beijing sees as a direct challenge. This has created a tense triangular relationship, where every move is met with counter-moves, raising the stakes for all involved. Minor skirmishes have escalated into confrontations involving warships and Coast Guard vessels. The recent standoff near Scarborough Shoal, involving a U.S. destroyer and a rapid Chinese response, shows how quickly tensions can spiral. The world watches as the South China Sea, once a regional issue, becomes a global flashpoint. The actions taken here could have profound consequences for global peace and security. The South China Sea is no longer just about territory. It's about the future balance of power. In September 2025, the USS Halsey, a U.S.-guided missile destroyer, sailed near Scarborough Shoal on a freedom of navigation operation. These FONOPs challenge what the U.S. sees as excessive maritime claims, asserting that these are international waters. Scarborough Shoal is claimed by both China and the Philippines, but controlled by Beijing since 2012. The U.S. Navy publicized the operation, signaling its commitment to international law and its ally, the Philippines. The Halsey's presence was a direct challenge to China's claims, and its crew knew they were under close scrutiny. Chinese satellites, patrol aircraft, and naval vessels tracked the destroyer's every move. Beijing views these operations as aggressive incursions, not benign assertions of law. The U.S. insists it is upholding a rules-based order, but in these contested waters, even routine passage is fraught with risk. The Halsey's transit was a calculated assertion of principle, but it sailed into a storm of geopolitical ambition. The stage was set for confrontation, highlighting the deep divide between Washington and Beijing. In the South China Sea, every maneuver is a message, and every message carries the risk of escalation. The USS Halsey's patrol was more than a routine mission. It was a test of resolve. The world took notice. China's response to the USS Halsey was swift and aggressive. The PLA Navy dispatched a frigate and Coast Guard cutters to shadow the American destroyer, maneuvering dangerously close and issuing radio warnings. This gray zone tactic is meant to intimidate without triggering outright conflict, a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. Chinese state media broadcast the encounter, portraying China as the resolute defender of its sovereignty. The rapid response showcased Beijing's growing military capabilities, enabled by fortified artificial islands across the South China Sea. The shadowing of the Halsey was a demonstration of China's ability to project power and enforce its claims. The strategic landscape has shifted. China now has the means to respond instantly to any perceived challenge. The South China Sea dispute is rooted in history and law. China cites ancient maps and centuries-old activity to justify its sweeping nine-line, claiming nearly the entire sea. The Philippines, relying on geography and international law, asserts its rights within a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, as defined by UNCLOS. For generations, Filipino fishermen have relied on these waters, making China's claims feel like a violation of sovereignty. The conflict intensified as the potential for undersea oil and gas became clear. And as nationalism surged, China began occupying features and building structures, leading to standoffs with the Philippines and others. In 2016, an international tribunal ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Philippines, rejecting China's nine-line. China dismissed the ruling, ensuring the dispute would be decided by power, not law. The legal battle continues, but the reality at sea is shaped by strength. Scarborough Shoal is a small chain of reefs, barely visible at high tide, but its strategic value is immense. Located just 120 nautical miles from the Philippines, it's a critical outpost for controlling the northeastern South China Sea and the approaches to Manila Bay. If China were to build an artificial island here, it would complete a triangle of military outposts, giving Beijing effective control over the region. The shoal is also a rich fishing ground, vital for Filipino livelihoods. China's 2012 seizure of the shoal devastated local fishermen and fueled national outrage in the Philippines. For Manila, regaining access is a matter of pride and necessity. For Beijing, it's a symbol of dominance. For the U.S., preventing further militarization is a red line. The presence of the USS Halsey near the shoal was a clear warning to China. Scarborough Shoal is more than a reef. It's a symbol of sovereignty, strategy, and struggle. The Philippines' approach to the South China Sea has shifted dramatically. Under President Duterte, Manila sought accommodation with Beijing, downplaying the 2016 ruling and distancing itself from the U.S. This yielded little economic benefit and failed to stop China's assertiveness. President Marcos Jr. has reversed course, strengthening ties with the U.S. and granting expanded access to Philippine bases. This pivot has emboldened the Philippines to defend its maritime rights more assertively, publicizing Chinese harassment at sea. The U.S. has reaffirmed its security guarantees, making clear that its defense treaty covers attacks in the South China Sea. Joint military exercises have increased in scale and complexity, involving allies like Australia and Japan. The Philippines is now at the center of a coalition pushing back against China's actions. Transparency and alliance building are Manila's new tools. The era of quiet acquiescence is over. The Philippines is standing up, backed by powerful friends. The regional balance is shifting. The U.S. role in the South China Sea is complex. Officially, Washington takes no position on sovereignty claims, but insists on freedom of navigation and upholding international law. China's militarization of artificial islands is seen as a direct challenge to the post-war order the U.S. has championed. To counter this, the U.S. builds coalitions, strengthens alliances, and conducts joint military exercises. The 7th Fleet regularly patrols the region, and PhoNOPs like the Halseys are both a challenge to China and a reassurance to allies. Beijing views the U.S. as an outside power meddling in regional affairs, using the Philippines and others as pawns to contain China's rise. This narrative fuels China's military buildup and assertive actions. The result is a security dilemma. Each side's defensive moves are seen as threats by the other. Diplomatic forums like the Quad and ASEAN are used to coordinate policy and pressure Beijing. The U.S. presence is both a deterrent and a source of tension. The cycle of action and reaction continues, with no easy off-ramp. The South China Sea is now a stage for great power rivalry. The stakes could not be higher. The South China Sea is a lifeline for global trade. 1/3 of shipping, worth over $3 trillion annually, passes through its lanes. Any disruption, from conflict or blockade, would send shockwaves through the world economy, raising prices and threatening supply chains. The seabed holds untapped oil and gas, intensifying the competition. A crisis could halt energy exploration, spike prices, and destabilize economies from Japan to Europe. The constant risk of conflict chills investment and creates uncertainty across Asia. Southeast Asian nations are caught in the middle, forced to navigate between China and the West. The dispute is about more than territory. It's about the economic well-being of billions. The South China Sea is a cauldron of competing interests, where history, law, and power collide. The USS Halsey incident is just one symptom of a deeper US-China rivalry playing out on these waters. The Philippines, now firmly aligned with the US, has raised the stakes, making the region a potential flashpoint. The risk of miscalculation is ever present. A single incident could escalate rapidly. Crisis management mechanisms are fragile, undermined by years of distrust. A peaceful resolution requires respect for international law and creative diplomacy, both in short supply. China must see that cooperation serves its interests better than coercion. The US and allies must manage China's rise without provoking unnecessary confrontation. The fate of the South China Sea will shape global stability and the balance of power in the 21st century. The world watches, hoping for peace, but bracing for the storm.